5 Bitter Truths of Old Age You Must Accept to Live a Peaceful and Happy Life. Have you ever felt like aging is a battle no one prepared you for? One day you wake up and realize your body doesn't move the way it used to. Friends you once spoke to daily slowly drift away. The world feels faster and you wonder, when did I start feeling invisible? Growing older isn't for the weak. It challenges you in ways you never expected. The worst part? No one tells you the truth about what's coming. Society pushes anti-aging creams, quick fixes, and empty promises. But the real challenges of aging? They go unspoken. But here's something most people don't realize. Resisting aging will only make you miserable. The key isn't to fight it, it's to understand it, accept it, and find peace in it. In this video, I'll reveal 5 bitter but essential truths about aging, the kind no one warns you about. And here's why you need to stay until the end. Once you accept these truths, you'll feel lighter, freer, and more at peace with the life you have now. So, before we dive in, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and comment 1 below if you're ready to embrace the wisdom of aging. Let's begin. 1. You will be forgotten faster than you think. The ancient Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Time is like a river made up of the events which happen and a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen it is carried away, and another comes in its place, and this too will be carried away." It is a truth as old as time. No matter how hard we work, how deeply we love, or how much we contribute, the world will move on without us. The monuments of great kings crumble, the names of once powerful rulers fade into forgotten records, and even the most passionate lovers are eventually reduced to echoes in history. Consider the story of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the man who unified China, built the Great Wall, and sought immortality. He commanded an army of 8,000 terracotta warriors to guard his soul in the afterlife, believing that if his empire endured, so would his name. But time had other plans. Centuries passed, and his tomb was buried beneath the earth, lost to history until a farmer stumbled upon it in 1974. His ambition was vast, but the people who once feared him, the hands that built his empire, they were all forgotten. What remains today is not the man himself, but the idea of him. A lesson, a curiosity, an artifact. If even emperors are forgotten, what does that mean for us? The answer is simple. We must live for today, not for the illusion of immortality. We cannot control how long we are remembered, but we can control how deeply we love, how kindly we treat others, and how fully we embrace the life before us. That is the only true way to leave something behind. I once knew a man named Thomas Adler, a name you won't find in any history book, but I remember him well. Thomas spent his whole life trying to make a mark on the world. He built a thriving business from nothing, worked tirelessly to provide for his family, and spent decades trying to be somebody who mattered. I met Thomas in his later years, when his once powerful voice had softened, and the weight of time pressed heavy on his shoulders. He was a man of great ambition, but also of great worry. One evening, as we sat on his porch, watching the last rays of sunlight stretch across the sky, he sighed deeply and said, "You ever think about what happens when we're gone?" I knew what he meant. Not about death, but about being forgotten. He told me he had spent his whole life making sure he would be remembered. He had poured money into charities, built a foundation in his name, and made sure his business carried the Adler legacy. I thought if I built something big enough, something important enough, maybe people wouldn't forget me. But now, in his old age, reality was creeping in. His business? New executives were taking over, phasing out his old ways. His foundation? A handful of board members, most of whom never even met him, made decisions with no thought of the man behind the name. His children, grown now with families of their own, too busy to visit often. "I gave everything to make sure I mattered," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't think it worked." I took a deep breath and told him a story. "There was once a king," I began, "who feared being forgotten. He was wise, powerful, and beloved by his people. But no matter how much he accomplished, he couldn't escape the thought that someday his name would fade. So the king gathered the greatest sculptors in the land and commanded them, 'Build me a statue that will last forever. Let the people remember me.' The sculptors worked tirelessly, chiseling his face into the hardest stone. They placed it in the center of the city, where all could see. At first the people marveled. They spoke of the king's greatness, pointing to the statue with admiration. But years passed. New kings came. The city grew. Eventually, the statue became just another part of the landscape. People walked past it without a second glance. Then one day, a great storm came, and the statue crumbled into dust. The king's name was forgotten, but his acts of kindness, the laws he made to help the poor, the wisdom he shared with his people, they lived on, not in stone, but in the way people treated one another, in the way they governed their land, in the way they raised their children. Thomas sat in silence, staring at the horizon. "So what do you think happens to us?" he asked after a long pause. I smiled. "We live on, Thomas. Not in stone, not in statues, but in the small, quiet ways we've touched people's lives." He nodded slowly, the worry in his eyes softening. At that day on, Thomas stopped worrying about his legacy. Instead, he started living. He spent time with his grandchildren, not as a businessman, but as a grandfather who listened to their stories and laughed at their jokes. He called old friends, not to discuss achievements but just to talk, to reminisce, to share a moment of warmth. He started volunteering at the local library, reading to children not because his name would be remembered, but because it brought joy right now. When Thomas passed away, his name didn't make the headlines. His business moved on without him. His foundation continued, but fewer people remembered the man behind it. And yet, in the months that followed, I saw something remarkable. I saw a librarian crying as she spoke about how much joy Thomas had brought to the children. I saw his old friend, now frail himself, holding on to a letter Thomas had written, rereading it as if it were gold. I saw his grandson, standing at his funeral, telling everyone how Grandpa Thomas taught me how to be kind, and that's when I realized the truth. We will all be forgotten faster than we think, but that doesn't matter. Because the love, the kindness, and the warmth we share, that's what remains, not in history books, not in statues, but in the quiet, unseen ways we shape the world. And now, my friend, I ask you this. What do you want to be remembered for? Not the grand things, not the money, the career, or the titles, but the small things, the gentle hand you offered to a friend, the laughter you shared with your family, the wisdom you passed down to someone younger. If you've ever worried about being forgotten, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. What lesson do you want to leave behind? Because maybe, just maybe, the words you write today will be remembered by someone tomorrow, and that, my friend, is enough. 2. Your body will betray you. The Taoist philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "If you realize that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to. There is no greater lesson in aging than this. We are born into a body that is full of energy, strength, and resilience. We take for granted the way our legs carry us, the way our hands grip without pain, the way we can rise each morning without effort. But time is a patient thief. It does not take all at once, but slowly, day by day." Look at the great warriors of history. Julius Caesar, undefeated on the battlefield, eventually fell not to an enemy's sword but to time. Look at the brilliant minds. Leonardo da Vinci, once a master of his craft, later struggled to hold a brush steady. No one, no matter how powerful, can escape the quiet betrayal of their own body. But what if this betrayal is not a curse but a teacher? What if every ache, every slowed step is a lesson in patience, in resilience, in adaptation? The oak tree does not resist the wind, it bends. The river does not fight the rocks, it flows around them. The body too demands a different kind of wisdom in old age. It no longer thrives on force but on understanding. When we stop resenting the body for changing and start working with it instead of against it, we find peace. Aging does not have to be a battle, it can be a dance. I once knew a man named Edward Sullivan. For 60 years he worked with his hands, shaping wood into things of beauty. He built homes, carved intricate designs into furniture, and, with nothing but patience and skill, turned raw timber into something that would last generations. His hands were his pride. Thick, calloused fingers that had once gripped tools with strength. Wrists that could drive a nail in with a single blow. Arms that never tired, even after a long day's work. Then one morning something changed. I remember the way he told me, sitting across from me in the quiet hum of a late afternoon. "It started with my grip," he said, flexing his fingers slowly, as if remembering what they once were. "One day I picked up my hammer, and it felt heavier, like it didn't belong in my hand anymore." At first he ignored it. He worked harder, thinking he just needed to push through. But the pain came next. His fingers stiffened in the mornings, his wrists ached, and soon the work he had done effortlessly for decades became a struggle. "I thought I could fight it," he admitted, shaking his head. "I thought if I just kept pushing I'd get my strength back. But the body does not negotiate. It does not care for willpower. It does not listen to demands." One day his hands failed him completely. A simple task, carving a wooden figure for his grandson, became impossible. His fingers trembled, the blade slipped, and for the first time in his life he felt helpless. He was furious. Furious at his body for betraying him. Furious at himself for not being the man he once was. For months he refused to accept it. He pushed his hands beyond their limits, ignoring the pain, until one morning he woke up and couldn't even hold a cup of coffee. The fight was over, or so he thought. One evening, his grandson, a boy with bright eyes and endless curiosity, came to him with a piece of wood and said, "Grandpa, can you show me how to carve?" Edward almost said no, almost told him that his hands weren't what they used to be. But then he saw the boy's eagerness, the same eagerness he once had when he first picked up his father's tools. And so, instead of carving for his grandson, he began teaching him, slowly, patiently, guiding his small hands over the wood, and something changed. "I realized that just because my hands couldn't build anymore, didn't mean my knowledge was useless," he said. "My strength had faded, but my wisdom hadn't." He could no longer carve masterpieces, but he could teach a new generation how to create. His workshop, once a place of solitude, became a place of learning. His grandson was the first to sit beside him, then his nephew, then the neighbor's boy. Before long he was teaching more than working, and for the first time in his life he felt truly at peace. Because the truth is, the body will always change, but wisdom, once earned, does not fade. Edward Sullivan did not leave behind towering sculptures or grand houses. But what he left behind? A dozen young men, hands steady, hearts full, carrying his lessons forward, and in that, he found something greater than strength. I have lived long enough to know this: our bodies will betray us, but how we respond to that betrayal is what defines us. Do we fight it? Do we cling to what we've lost, drowning in resentment, or do we adapt? Do we find new ways to move, to live, to pass on what we know? I want to hear from you. What part of aging has been the hardest for you to accept, and what have you learned from it? Leave a comment below. Your words may just help someone else find peace in their own journey, because in the end, it is not our strength that makes us wise. It is our willingness to change. 3. You can't keep everyone in your life. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus once said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man." Friendships, family ties, and even the deepest connections change with time, not because people are cruel or disloyal, but because life itself is always moving. Consider the story of Genghis Khan, the mighty ruler who conquered vast lands and built an empire. At his peak, he had loyal generals, trusted advisors, and warriors who swore to stand by him forever. But as the years passed, those bonds shifted. Some warriors found new lands to settle in, others left to seek their own power, and some simply drifted away, carried by the currents of life. It happens to all of us. The childhood friend who once felt like a sibling barely calls anymore. The cousin who shared all your secrets becomes a stranger. Even our own children who once clung to us build their own lives, needing us less and less. But here is the wisdom: not every relationship is meant to last a lifetime. Some people are with us for a chapter, not the whole book. And that's okay. The goal is not to hold on to everyone, but to cherish those who choose to stay. Let go with grace. Be grateful for the time you had. And instead of mourning who has left, focus on those who are still beside you. Because life, like a river, never stops flowing. I had a friend once. His name was Samuel. If you asked me 60 years ago, I would have told you that Sam and I would be inseparable forever. We met in college, young, ambitious, full of ideas about the world. We traveled together, built our careers side by side, and stood as best men at each other's weddings. For years, Sam and I were a constant in each other's lives. But then, life started pulling us in different directions. First, it was our careers. I settled into a stable job, while Sam became a businessman always on the move. Then, it was our families. Weekend adventures turned into PTA meetings, bills, and responsibilities. And one day, without either of us realizing it, Months turned into years of silence. I remember reaching for my phone once, staring at his number, thinking I should call him, but I didn't, and neither did he. I told myself it was just life, people drift apart, it's normal. But deep down, I wondered, was it my fault? Had I not made enough of an effort? Did he simply stop caring? Then, one winter morning, I received a letter. It was from Sam's wife. Sam had passed away. She told me he had always meant to call, that he kept a picture of us from our youth in his study, that despite the years of silence he still thought of me as his best friend. I sat in my chair, staring at the words, feeling the weight of every lost conversation, every missed opportunity. How foolish we had been, both waiting for the other to reach out, until time stole the choice away. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through old letters, faded photographs, and the memories of a friendship that had once been everything. And as much as it hurt, I smiled, because here's the truth. Some people will stay in your life forever, and some will not, but that does not mean their presence was any less meaningful. Sam and I may have drifted apart, but I would not trade a single moment of our friendship for anything. And that's when I understood something important. Not all friendships fade because of anger or betrayal. Sometimes they simply run their course. People grow. Priorities change. And while some relationships can withstand the test of time, others are only meant to be part of our journey for a season. But that does not mean they were not real. That does not mean they were not valuable. So I made a promise to myself that night. I would not dwell on who had left or who had become distant. Instead, I would focus on who was still here. The neighbor who always waved hello, the friend who still called once in a while, the family members who made the effort to stay connected, and most importantly, I would no longer wait for someone else to reach out first, because in the end, regret is heavier than any goodbye. There comes a time in life when we realize we cannot hold on to everyone, but we do have a choice. We can resent the ones who drift away, or we can cherish the ones who stay. Now, my dear friend, I ask you, who is someone you haven't spoken to in a long time but still think about? Maybe it's a friend, a cousin, a neighbor, someone who once meant the world to you. If you feel comfortable, share your story in the comments below, or better yet, pick up the phone. Send a message, because some distances can still be bridged before it's too late, and if you, like me, have lost a friend to time, tell me, what lesson did they leave behind in your heart? Because sometimes, even in their absence, they still shape who we become. 4. You must accept that you no longer look young. The great Confucius once said, they must often change who would be constant in happiness. For centuries, humans have chased youth like a mirage in the desert, believing that beauty is something that must be preserved at all costs. Queens bathed in milk, emperors sought eternal elixirs, and today, industries profit from the fear of aging. But time, my friend, is not an enemy, it is a sculptor. Take, for example, Empress Dowager Cixi of China. In her youth, she was said to be one of the most beautiful women of the royal court. But as the years passed, she feared losing the power that came with beauty. She surrounded herself with doctors, bathed in crushed pearls, and even avoided mirrors so she wouldn't have to see the truth of time's work yet. Despite her efforts, age came for her anyway. Contrast this with Maya Angelou, the celebrated poet. She embraced her aging, wore her silver hair with pride, and when asked about her wrinkles, she smiled and said, "They are not wrinkles, they are my stripes. They show that I have been here." This is the difference. Some run from time, while others wear it like a crown. The lines on your face, they are the poetry of your past. The silver in your hair, the moonlight of your wisdom. No cream, no surgery, no potion can outmatch the beauty of a life well lived. I remember the first time I truly saw myself, not the way I used to look at myself in my 20s, adjusting my hair in a shop window, or in my 40s, rushing past the mirror as I got ready for work. No, this time was different. I was 68, standing in my bedroom, brushing my silver-streaked hair, when I caught a glimpse of my reflection, and I paused. For the first time, I really looked. There were deep lines on my forehead, the kind that came from years of thinking too much, worrying too much, loving too much. The corners of my eyes had softened, etched with the evidence of laughter. My hands, once so smooth, now bore veins and ridges like an old map, tracing the places I had been. For a moment I felt a sadness I couldn't explain. Where had the young girl gone? I traced my fingers over my cheek and whispered, "Is this really me?" And then, as if on cue, I heard laughter from the other room. "My granddaughter!" I walked out and found her playing with her mother, my daughter. 2 generations, both young, both vibrant, both reflections of who I once was. And I realized something. I had spent years chasing something I was never meant to keep. I had tried the expensive creams, the hair dyes, the tricks to hide the changes that time had so gently placed upon me. But looking at my granddaughter with her big, curious eyes, and my daughter, wise in her own way, I understood. Youth is not something we lose. It is something we pass on. I sat beside them, smiling as they played, and I thought of my own grandmother, how I used to watch her tie her silver hair into a bun, how her hands, wrinkled and warm, used to hold mine. I never once thought she was anything but beautiful. I never saw her wrinkles as flaws. I saw them as proof that she had lived. So why, I wondered, had I been so afraid of my own reflection? That night I went back to my mirror, but this time I did not ask where the young girl had gone. Instead, I smiled at the woman who had replaced her. She was not a stranger. She was me, the sum of every year, every joy, every triumph, and for the first time in a long time, I felt beautiful. There is no battle against time, only a choice. Will you mourn the years that have passed, or will you embrace the beauty of what remains? Look in the mirror today. Don't search for the past. See the person who has lived, who has loved, who has endured. And now, tell me, my friend, what part of yourself have you learned to love with age? Is it the wisdom in your heart, the kindness in your soul, the strength in your hands? Share your thoughts in the comments, because in the end, beauty is not measured in years. It is measured in how deeply you have lived. 5. You will see more people you love die. The ancient Stoic Seneca once wrote, "The day which we fear as our last is but the birthday of eternity." For as long as humans have walked this earth, we have struggled with the pain of loss. We love and so we grieve. Kings, poets, warriors, and wise men, none have been spared the sorrow of watching those they cherish fade into memory. Consider Abraham Lincoln. Before he became one of the most revered leaders in history, he endured unimaginable loss. His mother, his sister, his first love, and 2 of his sons all taken from him too soon. Each loss carved deeper into his heart, but instead of letting grief consume him, he let it shape him. He honored their memory not by drowning in sorrow, but by living with purpose. His resilience, his compassion, and his determination to bring justice to a divided nation were born from the pain of losing those he loved. This is the truth. Grief never leaves us, but neither does love. The people we lose do not vanish. They remain in the lessons they taught us, the kindness they shared, the love they left behind. We carry them forward not in mourning but in the way we choose to live. That, my friend, is how we honor the dead. There was a chair by my window, a simple wooden thing, a little worn, a little creaky, but for 50 years it was my husband's favorite spot. Every morning, rain or shine, he would sit there with his coffee, staring out at the world. Sometimes he read the newspaper, sometimes he just listened to the birds, and sometimes he would look at me and say, "Come sit with me, love." And I always did. We sat through every season of life in that chair. We watched our children grow. We whispered about our dreams. We held hands in silence when the world outside felt too heavy. Then, one day, he was gone, and the chair sat empty. For weeks I couldn't look at it without feeling like the house itself had lost its heartbeat. The silence was deafening. The mornings, once filled with the sound of his voice, felt unbearably long. Grief is strange. It doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in through the small things, the unshared morning coffee, the absence of a hand to hold, the echo of laughter that no longer fills the room. At first, I tried to avoid it. I stopped sitting by the window. I convinced myself that if I didn't look at the chair, I wouldn't feel the loss so deeply. But grief does not work that way. One afternoon, after yet another long, lonely day, I found myself standing in front of it, and without thinking, I sat down. The wood creaked beneath me just as it always had. The sun filtered through the window just as it always had. And in that moment, I realized something. He was still here. Not in body, but in memory, in the stories we shared. In the way I still knew exactly what he would say if he were sitting beside me. So I began to talk to him. At first it felt strange, but then it felt natural. I told him about my day, about how the kids were doing, about the birds outside and the changing of the seasons. And in those quiet conversations with the empty chair, I learned the most important lesson of all. We do not move on from grief, we move forward with it. I still miss him, I always will, but now when I sit in that chair, I do not feel only loss, I feel love. Because love does not die. It lingers in the spaces we once shared. It lives in the way we tell their stories. It thrives in the way we carry their lessons forward. And that, my friend, is why I still sit by the window. There comes a time in life when we must carry the weight of loss. But grief is not a burden. It is a reminder of how deeply we have loved. So now I ask you, who do you carry with you? A parent, a sibling, a dear friend? Someone whose laughter still echoes in your heart, whose wisdom still guides you even in their absence? If you feel comfortable, share their name in the comments. Tell me a lesson they left behind, a memory that still brings you warmth, because as long as we remember them, they are never truly gone. Aging is not just about loss, it's about understanding what truly matters. Yes, we will be forgotten faster than we think. Yes, our bodies will slow down. Yes, friendships will fade, and the mirror will show someone we don't always recognize. And yes, we will lose people we love. But here's the truth no one tells you. None of this means life loses its meaning, because what stays is what we give. The kindness, the wisdom, the love. Not in grand monuments or perfect skin, but in the way we touch the lives around us. So today, my friend, I ask you, what is the lesson that aging has taught you? If you've ever struggled with these truths, if you've found your own way to embrace them, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just be the one that helps someone else find peace. And if you found this video meaningful, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but because somewhere out there, someone else needs to hear this too. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay wise, stay strong, and live fully.